This is episode number 166 of the Life, Strength, and Health podcast. I'm Kim, and I'm joined with Jamal.
Greetings, everyone.
And
peace and blessings.
Yes, and thank you for joining us this week. This episode is actually part one of a two-part series that we'll be sharing with you on the podcast. On Saturday, we had a webinar where we discussed the coronavirus and discussed ways of armoring yourself. And there was so much great content. We got so much great feedback that we wanted to break it up and put it on the podcast. And this is going to be part one. And the reason we felt compelled to do the webinar is, unless you've been living under a rock, the coronavirus is the main topic of discussion, and understandably so. There is a lot of fear, concern, and these are all understandable emotions that you can be feeling right now because there's just so much that is so unknown about it. There's a lot of changes going on with industries and the schools and all these places that are shutting down for 2 weeks to a month. You have cities being quarantined. So everyone is so concerned and, understandably so. You want to know what's going on. How is this going to affect us health wise, financially and all these things. So we wanted to give our perspective on it. And we did a webinar this past Saturday, and we had a special guest, Huron Benson, that was on the webinar. And Huron is a business continuity and disaster recovery specialist. This is what she does as a profession for larger organizations. And she came on the webinar to give us some very powerful tips on how we can best prepare ourselves for what we're going through right now.
Yes, and we thought that it was important to give a holistic perspective. We always try to provide a well-rounded perspective so that you can see this from every angle and you can properly prepare. Mainstream takes a very linear approach to how they see and deal with things. So we've been getting some information in regards to what we can do to protect ourselves, such as wash your hands. If you're starting to feel a little sick, quarantine yourself, keep your distance. But we haven't gotten much more than that. And I know people are looking for more information than just washing your hands.
Right.
And that is serious. Like washing your hands could mean you not contracting this, but there are so many other things that are important to look at. Mm-hmm. And we're going to explore those things so that we can empower you, because the more that you know, the more prepared you are, the more relaxed and centered you can be.
Right, because you definitely want to be concerned and take this very seriously, but you don't want to move in fear, because fear doesn't serve any of us. Yes. Right? It's just very stressful. So before we dive into the episode, I just want to read a little bit about Huron so you know more about her. The hurricane, also known as the bad thing, is heading directly in the path of your company. What are your plans to mitigate the potential impact? Huron Benson can provide the calm before, during, and after the storm. In the last 20 years, she's been working in IT and business continuity within the private sector of the insurance and investment banking industries. She holds the Disaster Recovery Institute Certified Business Continuity Professional Certification. HBE Consulting LLC was formed to assist small businesses to think and plan for the what-if scenarios and lessen the impact of a business disruption. The show notes page for this episode is lifestrengthandhealth.com/166. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode.
Greetings, everyone. Jamal here. Kim is here as well. Her camera's off. She's in the chats, just monitoring questions and things like that. There is a question section where you can ask your questions. And we're going to get to the questions at the end of this. So in the beginning, we'll just kind of roll through it. And then afterwards, we will answer your questions. reason why we decided to have this is just looking at everything that's going on with the coronavirus. Looks like it's definitely a growing concern. A lot of our clients that have been coming in for the past couple of days have been asking a lot of questions. We've actually been getting a lot of calls about it. People want to know my thoughts, and people want to know the seriousness of it and what can they do to empower themselves. So we decided to have a webinar tonight to discuss it a bit, right? Because as far as mainstream media is concerned, they look at it from, a more linear perspective, and we wanted to give a holistic approach to it. All right. We want to look at all avenues and, just kind of take it from there. But one thing is that this is something that's serious. There's a lot of speculation out there about it. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about why this is happening. Where is it coming from? And those things aren't really important. And we're not going to talk about any of those things right now because it's a very real thing. It's something that's happening. So we need to address what's actually happening. So I'm going to be talking about tonight how to armor up as much as you can, how to prepare as much as you can, right? How to defend yourself and how to think ahead. And we brought a special guest on tonight that is going to join the conversation and be able to provide some insight and help you with that as well. So I've been looking at a lot of different media outlets, and I've been looking at the CDC, right? Because I think that it's important to really understand what's going on. So I'm going to the people that's actually studying these diseases and has been studying them for a while. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of speculation, but I wanted to go to a very reliable source in really understanding and breaking this down. So what I would like to do is, because I looked at the most recent update from CDC that they gave yesterday. It's a short update, about a minute and a half. I just wanted to play that just to put things in perspective. So give me a second. I'm going to play that video.
As of this morning, March 13th, CDC is reporting more than 1,500 cases of COVID-19 across the United States. Most states have been impacted, but most only have a few cases. And it is still only a few states that have most of the cases and have sustained community spread. This week, CDC issued a number of guidances. These are for state health departments, healthcare providers, and for schools. And they really focus on how we can protect those among us who are most vulnerable, which for this disease are older adults. For me, our Nana is an important part of the family, but she's in a long-term care facility. And so for now, we're not visiting her because we don't want to take the chance of introducing germs into the facility. We'll stay in touch in other ways. Let's work together to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities. Please check cdc.gov/COVID-19 for more information.
Yeah, I just wanted to play that just to, put things in perspective. Our client base ranges in all different ages. But the bulk of our client base, it ranges from 35 to 65 years old. And, at least half of our clients are over 50. So there are growing concerns for people that are older with this virus, and young people may be able to withstand it more than than the older population, but we can be carriers of it, and we can expose our elders and expose this thing to our children. So whether it directly applies to us or not, it applies to all of us. So I think it's important to understand the dynamics of that. Also, it's important to understand that the way that you live and the way that you eat and take care of yourself, it has an effect on the aging of your body. I had a client of mine. He said that he went in to have young man. He's in his 40s, and he had a test done, and they said that he had the arteries of a 70-year-old. Right? How many times do we look at people and they take really good care of themselves? They eat very well, and they may be 50 years old and they look a lot younger, right? How many times do we see people that don't take care of themselves? They trash their health and they look a lot older. So even though we have a number age, we do have a physical age. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you can physically be older, even though that number is younger. So if you're in a weakened state, then, you're at more risk than if you were at a stronger state, right? Have you ever suffered from something, or knew people that suffered from something more serious, maybe like a serious strand of the flu, and you've been around these people and you didn't get it, right? Because your immunity is strong. I know I've been in situations where I've been exposed to things and I was there with other people and they got it and I didn't, right? Or, you get something that's more serious, and for some, it lingers on for 2 weeks to a month, and for you, it's a couple of days to a week. So all of these things matter when it comes to our health and how we take care of ourselves. So I know from a overall perspective, a basic medical perspective, we're looking at this thing like, okay, it's affecting the elderly and it's affecting the young. But the way I see it is, if you're not taking care of yourself and your body is aged, you fall into that category of being older, and it could hit you a lot harder. So I think that this is something serious for everyone. I'm just creating this picture. So my thing is, and as well as Kim, is let's prepare ourselves. Let's look at this thing and prepare, because it's better to be prepared than to not be, right? And these things unfold and we're unprepared. So we need to make sure that we're prepared on every level. This talk that we're having tonight is not to make you fearful, right? Because one of the things that fear does is fear weakens your immunity. So this isn't about being fearful of what's happening. This is more about being empowered. It's more about taking it serious and being empowered and making sure that you're taking the necessary steps so that you can actually be relaxed and you can be at ease and your immunity can be stronger. But it's really important just to put it in perspective, but you don't need to be fearful. There is a need for concern, but we don't want to move in fear, because the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you can be. So you don't have to worry about these scenarios because you've already planned for them. So that automatically brings a level of comfort. If you know that your immune system is as strong as it could be, right? You know that your defenses are high. That brings a level of comfort. So that is the reason why we wanted to get into this today. Before we dive into some of the main topics, Another thing that's being spoken about is just kind of basic prevention that seems to be what everyone is talking about and is very important. So I do want to show something on that eventually. We'll get to that at the end. But I know a lot of people even have questions on just understanding exactly what the coronavirus is. So I have another short video from the CDC, a couple minutes long, no more than 5 minutes, where they're explaining exactly what the coronavirus is, and they use some nice animation to really explain it. So I'm going to show that, and then we're going to get into the conversation.
Coronaviruses are a family of viruses that cause sicknesses like the common cold, as well as more severe diseases such as Middle East Respiratory Syndrome or severe acute respiratory syndrome. A novel coronavirus is a new strain, one that has not previously been recognized in humans. Coronaviruses cause diseases in mammals and birds. A zoonotic virus is one that is transmitted between animals and people. When a virus circulating in animal populations infects people, this is termed a spillover event. It is speculated that the 2019 novel coronavirus, or COVID-19, originated in bats and was transmitted to humans, possibly with pangolins as an intermediate host. Unfortunately, COVID-19 is now spreading from human to human as well. COVID-19 has surpassed the SARS death toll in a matter of weeks. Even though the death rate is much lower, it spreads faster. Early data suggests that in around 82% of cases, symptoms are relatively mild. The illness begins and ends in the lungs. However, the remainder of cases are severe or critical, typically in older or immunocompromised individuals. How does COVID-19 affect the body? The virus is fitted with protein spikes sticking out of the envelope that forms the surface and houses a core of genetic material. Any virus that enters your body looks for cells with compatible receptors, ones that allow it to invade the cell. Once they find the right cell, they enter and use the cell's replication machinery to create copies of themselves. It is likely that COVID-19 uses the same receptor as SARS, found in both lungs and small intestines. It is thought that COVID-19 shares many similarities with SARS, which has 3 phases of attack: viral replication, hyperreactivity of the immune system, and finally, pulmonary destruction. Early on in infection, the coronavirus invades 2 types of cells in the lungs: mucus and cilia cells. Mucus keeps your lungs from drying out and protects them from pathogens. Cilia beat the mucus towards the exterior of your body, clearing debris, including viruses, out of your lungs. Cilia cells are the preferred hosts of SARS-CoV and are likely the preferred hosts of the new coronavirus. When these cells die, they slough off into your airways, filling them with debris and fluid. Symptoms include a fever, cough, and breathing difficulties. Many of those infected get pneumonia in both their lungs. Enter the immune system. The immune cells recognize the virus and flood into the lungs. The lung tissue becomes inflamed. During normal immune function, the inflammatory process is highly regulated and is confined to infected areas. However, sometimes the immune system overreacts, and this results in damage to healthy tissue. More cells die and slough off into the lungs, further clogging them and worsening the pneumonia. As damage to the lungs increases, stage 3 begins, potentially resulting in respiratory failure. Patients that reach this stage of infection can incur permanent lung damage or even die. We see the same lesions in the lungs of those infected by the novel coronavirus as those with SARS. SARS creates holes in the lungs, so they look honeycomb-like. This is probably due to the aforementioned overreactive immune response, which affects both healthy and infected tissue and creates scars that stiffen the lungs. As such, some patients may require ventilators to aid breathing. The inflammation also results in more permeable alveoli. Alveoli are the location of the thin interface of gas exchange, where your lungs replace carbon dioxide in your blood with fresh oxygen you just inhaled. Increased permeability causes fluid to leak into the lungs. This decreases the lung's ability to oxygenate blood, and in severe cases, floods them so that you become unable to breathe. Sometimes this can be fatal. The immune system's overreaction can also cause another kind of damage. Proteins called cytokines are the immune system's alarm system. recruiting immune cells to the infection site. Overproduction of cytokines can result in a cytokine storm, where there is large-scale inflammation in the body. Blood vessels become more permeable and fluid seeps out. This makes it difficult for blood and oxygen to reach the rest of the body and can result in multi-organ failure. This has happened in the most severe cases of COVID-19. Although there are no specific treatments for coronaviruses, symptoms can be treated through supportive care. Also, vaccines are currently in development. So, what can you do to protect yourself from COVID-19? Advisories vary in different countries, but the basic protocol comes down to regular hand washing, avoiding close contact with anyone coughing or sneezing, avoiding unnecessary contact with animals, washing hands after contact with animals, thoroughly cooking meat and eggs prior to consumption, and covering your mouth and nose while coughing or sneezing. Respiratory viruses are typically transmitted via droplets in sneezes or coughs of those infected, so preventing their travel stops the spread of disease.
I just wanted to show that video for those who aren't totally aware of exactly what the coronavirus is, and just give you some insight on that. So let's take a look at the polls. Where we at here? Okay, so we got 47% say that they're very concerned, and we have 53% say that they're a little concerned, and we have 0% that say that they're not concerned at all. Okay, I think that's very fair. And what we're going to do is at the end of this kind of webinar, we'll do it again. See if that changes for you or if it's the same. So when we look at this thing from a holistic perspective, we also have to think about our safety beyond just the things that we're being told to do. So I wanted to get a specialist on with us. And I have Huron Benson on. Huron, are you there? While we're waiting for...
Yeah, Tori, that was me. Tori said I can hear her now, but that was me.
Yeah, while we're waiting for her to come back on, I'll just kind of tell you some of the things that we're doing here just to try to, take your safety first. We increased our cleaning company to come in more often. We're disinfecting throughout the day just to make sure that, everything is sanitized. We also started diffusing essential oils that destroy virus and bacteria from the air. So we're diffusing that. A lot of times when you come to Life, Strength, and Health, we have the diffusers going. We're trying to, create a certain mood and state, but we have a transition over to things that are a little bit more protective. So we want you to, feel comfortable when you come to our center to know that we're taking the measures to try to, keep everyone healthy and safe. If you, there she is. If you have to go into work and you're not working from home, it is good to have a diffuser, and you can run, there's two oils, excuse me. One is called Nature's Shield, and the other one is Thieves Oil. That's a nice combination of some antimicrobial oils that are good to diffuse. And it disinfects, and you can put them in cleaning solutions or just water, and you can clean and spray things naturally, wipe down things easily. You can even take it internally. So those oils are ancient oils that have been shown to really boost immunity and protect you from a lot of things. So one company is by now Nature's Shield. The other company is Thieves. by Young Living. So those are good oils to have. Welcome, Huron. Happy that you could join us today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here. And it's unfortunate that, I guess my industry or what I do for a living only gets exposed in these types of situations, when the bad things happen. But that's why the industry exists anyway. So,
yeah. Can you take a moment to share with everyone like your position and what it is that you do?
Sure. So like you said in your introduction, what I do is called business continuity and IT disaster recovery. And what that means is my job or my role within the company, amongst others on my team, is to ensure that the business can withstand any type of business disruption, whether that's, we plan for consequence-based situations. So scenarios will change and some will be similar, some will be very different, but the consequence is usually, the same. So, your loss of technology, your loss of staff, your loss of vendors that you use, loss of your primary office or building. So you plan for those things because various scenarios can cause those four things. So this here, you plan for the loss of staff. You can lose staff due to a terrorist attack, a fire in the building, or a pandemic like what we're, experiencing right now.
So, when we got to speaking, this is the first time I even knew that, major companies actually had this position as a permanent part of staff. Do all major, establishments have someone like you on board?
I would say probably all large companies will have someone, either one person or a team on board, particularly financial firms, due to it's heavily regulated and they're required to. Mm-hmm. You have other industries like insurance or manufacturers, same thing because of supply and chain demand. If things are interrupted, what do they do? You always have reputational risk of how you handle situations. So yes, most industries, most companies large companies will have someone like me full-time on staff. It's where you start getting into the middle size and especially small businesses, who just don't have the budget resource or even think about, mitigating their plans, creating mitigation plans to anything that can disrupt their business because they just don't have the time or the resources or the budget to do so.
So how long have you been, keeping an eye on this coronavirus situation?
Right. So when you think about financial firms, I'm talking about investment banking. You hear about the stock market and things like that. I work for a international, although U.S. bank, but it's very international. They have offices in China, Singapore, Taiwan, Manila. So they have employees there. So it's very important to keep your eye on globally what's happening around the world, and particularly if there's any impact to their employees, impact to their offices and business, obviously, and bottom line. So we've been looking at this since, I would say beginning to mid-January, and stood up what they called a pandemic working group to kind of activate the pandemic plan.
And since you've been following it, what have you been seeing?
So it was, a lot of times we think about, it's happening over there, although the way they planned for it, they listed every country that obviously that company had an office. So, obviously the U.S. and the UK was listed, but the numbers grew rapidly for China, over the days because they started to do testing, right? So every day we came into the office, so 24 hours later, there was like, another 5,000. I remember when the numbers only reported, at the time, you can only go off what the country actually reports. China was reporting like 700 cases. But by the end of the week, we were at 5,000 or something like that. We're like, whoa, what is going on? And it wasn't like yes, it was spreading fast, but they were also implementing the testing of it. So they were, the numbers were going up because these are now active cases. They're trying to identify the people. And at the time, like almost no other country had it or reported it, because they wasn't testing for it. I remember in the U.S., maybe just had one person who had traveled back from Wuhan. And that was like just mid-January.
Wow. So, what would you say is what would you say is different about this particular disruption that's like compared to the other things? Because a lot of people are making those comparisons and just saying, oh, we had SARS, we had the bird flu, we had these scares before, and it wasn't that serious, so that we have the flu, we have these deaths from the flu going on. The flu is more dangerous than the coronavirus. Like, what do you see that's different about this particular disruption compared to the others?
I see that. So the others, things happened. It's not. Maybe the U.S. News cycle didn't report or talk about it as much. Mm-hmm. But H1N. I was working at a insurance company at the time, like when SARS and H1N1 was here. That did spread and had some impact on employees, who had traveled around. It did not impact the economy. It did not impact how you travel or any of the service or travel industries at that time. And it didn't spread, or there was like, I don't know, maybe the testing was different or the symptoms were different. But I say that these things have never stopped being reported on. Mm-hmm. In my industry, there's a monthly meeting about threats. It's called the Threat Committee, subcommittee, where we're talking about cyber threats, health threats, pandemic threats, infrastructure threats, where things that happen around the world. So, there's always still cases here and there, but nothing to this level, or they're watching it to see if it's going to get to this level. So I would think that this kind of virus has been talked about probably since December. When they start seeing it in China, and it just kind of like grew and grew. It's different because it impacted the economy and the way that it's spreading. And I feel because it's a new virus, like, yes, it's on the back of the Lysol, but this is a new version of it. And the way it's impacting people is new. No one has immunity to it per se, right? You can get it and recover really fast, or you can get it and really get critical. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what's happening, the level. And our world is smaller. We are traveling everywhere quickly, fast. And it was just so happens, what did it coincide with? The Lunar New Year. Thousands of people are traveling to the Asian countries and back. It was just like a perfect storm. So I think that increased the exposure of it and the way the economy is reacting to it. And now, obviously, the way regular Main Street people are reacting to it is really, that's the big difference of it. And the extended of time that we're preparing for it because of what we've seen of how the other countries have reacted, China and Italy, and now other countries are, following suit.
So one of the things that you mentioned was the economy, which has been going on a serious ride for the past week. What are some of the other consequences have you been seeing as a result of this disruption?
Well, I think companies who have the capability have gone to like extreme measure to implement the working remotely. So, like back then, if you think about H1N1, SARS, that's technology. Technology is changing almost every year. So even back then, we didn't have the same remote capabilities as we do today. It was very limited back then. I mean, you might have had a laptop, but it was still very slow or difficult to connect to, and not everyone had one. Now, most people have laptops. The technology to remain in contact with your team members and connect to your company's network is a little bit more sophisticated. So companies are able to implement this whole, where they can, and for those employees who can, work from home across the board. Not just here and there. Like my company, we started with 4,600 people work from home for 2 weeks. And then the next 3 days, they increased it to everybody who could. Because they wanted to limit to those people who had to go into the office. Because again, it's an investment bank. They have to trade and make things. And there's a lot of compliance around that. They got to be on site. So they're trying to think about their health and their social distancing and making sure everyone works from home. So that in itself is a little bit different than a regular snow day, where you might just be home for a day, you're working from home maybe, the kids are home, they're looking at Netflix and streaming, and that's a day, maybe 2 days, depending on what the situation is. Hurricane, 1 or 2 days, as long as your house and your personal life wasn't impacted. We're talking, this is now going to be an extended period of time. At least this is what they're projecting. Due to the level of quarantine people need to be in. They anticipate, I guess, another part of the perfect storm. This is also spring break, where our teenagers, our young adults are like, bunk that. We're going down to Cancun. We're going down to Florida, and they're partying up. Guess who's coming back in the next few days? They all coming back. So those, I don't know if you guys realize it, but the Ivy League schools pulled the trigger like a week ago. So you had your Yales and Princetons and things like that. They're very large universities with the resources and budget to have people like me on campus and have planned for this at some point, where they know, okay, this is going to be the exposure and we're just going to move everything online. And they were able to do that very quickly. Unlike maybe a local community college wouldn't have someone like me on site, wouldn't have these plans in place to this extent for that period of time to have people working from home, or how are they going to do this? So it's just various levels of how people think about it. The large universities are like little cities in amongst themselves, labs and community centers and all these thousands of people are on campus at one given time. So they have to be prepared for that. And that's why it's like what you want to do, like from a business professional perspective, anything that's happening, you want to mitigate it as much as possible. You want to be able to bounce back and not take too much of a hit. Because when this is all over, you still want to be in business.
Right.
You still want to have a business. You want to still be able to get paid and have your services and provide and pay your employees if you have them. So this is that was what was different. The economy is reacting to this, and how the U.S., I think, population is reacting, because the world is smaller. We get to hear what they're doing in China, what we get to see and look at what's happening in Italy and how we're taking that on like, oh my God. And then, there's that level of panic and fear because what other countries have gone through and had to do to, I guess, prepare and get involved in a full country quarantine.
Yeah. I think that the thing that really got people's attention was the NBA, because I like we're starting to hear about the universities and things like that. But it seems like once the NBA pulled the trigger and they shut their season down, and then the other professional sports started to follow them, and they're closing down arenas and things like that. We've never experienced anything like that before. So I think that was one of the really big catalysts that made people say, wait a minute, like this, this is a little bit more serious here.
Right.
So yeah,
right. That's especially with the guy who probably thought this was a hoax, and you start rubbing the microphones and touching everything. I'm like, that guy something needs to happen. He needs some type of punishment for that. But what does that all play into? The economy, the money. That
Right.
plays into the money that they are going to now lose and all the ticket holders. So it's definitely a domino effect. You know,
Right.
I don't think we've seen anything like this in this country before. So when it starts hitting the pockets and the GDP of the country, that's what makes this very much different, even if you think, you know, this is not real or it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
It's impacting local economy, your community, obviously your school boards and budgets and things like that. And yeah.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my daughter, Soora. She's 10. And we were having a conversation, and I was just asking her about, you know, because I know she's hearing things and just wanted to put her at ease. And we have family meetings about it. And I was just asking her, you know, like, what are your thoughts around this? And she said that, you know, this is, you know, nothing like she's ever experienced in her lifetime, right? Her lifetime was only 10 years, but she's saying, I never experienced anything like this. And I'm thinking, I mean, me at 45, I've never experienced anything like this in my lifetime as well. So this is just as new to me. So, you know, this is definitely something worth talking about. Let me ask you a question. If we're looking at like, just like continuous progression, if this thing continues to progress and you know, it stays ahead of us and we don't, you know, kind of get in front of this thing, what do you think we could be looking at?
I think and this is, you know, as of Thursday, because Friday, I feel like I didn't keep track of things, or even today, but what they've implemented in New Rochelle up in New York, right? So New Rochelle is only a few minutes, you know, not a couple of minutes, but, you know, maybe a half hour outside of New York City or what have you. And that community travels a lot into the city. It's the, you know, an affluent area, and they pretty much have quarantined that area. They have brought in the National Guard, right? And I think the last time we saw a National Guard was not such a good situation.
Right.
You know, it was like protesting or something. So, you know, to quarantine, I mean, we're not in a country where it's like the government shuts things down or controls everything. Our states control it. But as a country, I always thought, like, how are they going to do what they did in China here? It seems like everyone is like very much individual states and they make the decisions. How would they do it as a country? Easy. I think the government can implement what they've done in New Rochelle and expand that. And that looks like how it looks in Italy. People are being made to stay inside their homes, and the National Guard is there to make sure that they're implementing that quarantine and helping with, you know, making sure common spaces and areas are clean and people are getting their supplies. You know, I think that's what started that whole toilet paper thing. You saw in China, they was only allowed to come out their apartments, you know, every 7 or 9 days at a time. So if you got a big family, you're like, oh my God, you know, when we run out of food, when we run out of that. So I think that's what sparked it. But, you know, I don't know how they will implement that here, but I think that could be the next step because every day we're hearing a new travel ban. Now they're considering domestic travel. So like, okay, so how far is this really going to go? How are you going to stop that? Because we travel by cars too, you know, so I'm thinking that will be the next step. The also next step, if they do that, or as the kids come back home from spring break or off of spring break, and now they have to work remotely, work online, whether it was grammar school or college, guess who else was working from home, you know, where they can? Their parents.
Right.
You know, so even at that level or at a quarantine level, what has not been tested before is everyone is at home on the computers, the Wi-Fis. The ISP providers have not seen that level of stress testing or stress level. You know, your AT&Ts, your Verizons, your Comcast, your Spectrums that I'm doing Zoom or I'm on WebEx for work. Then I have 2 kids, they're streaming, they're gaming. You know, my husband is, you know, on his work computer, video conferencing with his, you know, his team. I don't think they've seen where everyone has to do that at once in pockets. We have our snowstorms in the Northeast. All right, for a day. The whole country, so I think that will be interesting if that happened in the level of bandwidth, because if the internet goes down or there's constant hiccups in the internet, then money is not flowing, right? That's right. What happens. Money stops flowing. You can't communicate. You can't do a lot of things if the internet goes down, or even hiccups with it. And that will have some interruptions and disruptions with the economy and the money that flows.
And people are so used to being connected now. Like when that cuts off, I think people panic a little.
Yes.
So just looking at this holistically, how do we prepare? Because it's always better to be prepared and it not happen as opposed to it happening and not being prepared. So can you share with everyone just some basic things that people can do to prepare themselves for these things that it could potentially lead to?
Right. So these are things that a lot of times, like I said, scenarios and things, you can't plan for every scenario, but you can kind of plan for the consequence of it. So, if you lost power, what are the things that you should be prepared for if that happened? Always have certain things on hand in your household that are your foundational basic needs that perhaps you only will have to replace every so often, or if at all. So you want to have your flashlights, candles, extra batteries, things like that, emergency radio, if the TV and all that stuff, internet stuff goes down, right? You want to have water. Always have water on hand. And I know Mintu will get into things, healthy things, to keep on hand, but you want to have water. You want to have a gallon per person per day in your household. You want to have your non-perishable goods. Mintu will speak to the healthier part, but you have your canned and you have your packaged. So, Mintu talked about just keeping your health up all the time, not in the time of just in time of crisis, but as you go on. And there are things out there that on a healthier side that you can keep always on hand for the just in case situations. You want to have cash on hand. Okay. So we talked about the internet going down, hiccups here and there. You never know if there's a run on ATMs, and then there's no cash. So always try to keep some cash in your house. That's just old school, and small bills, right? If you needed to do that, always have a first aid kit, right? Make sure it has things that you need. So in this situation, being that it's a pandemic, face masks became the thing, but if you had a proper first aid kit, you had that already in your kit. You might just need extra now, and gloves and things like that. You want to keep your important papers in an area that you can grab them rather quickly. You're not digging through piles and file cabinets to find it. You want to go old school with your contact numbers. This is something that we all kind of laugh about, that we don't remember anyone's phone number anymore. But quite honestly, if there is a power glitch, or what do they call it, EMP or something, how do you get in contact with, how do I get in contact with Mintu? I don't remember Mintu's number, or if the number even works, at that point. But how can I contact him? So just writing down phone numbers. And unfortunately, a lot of us gave up our landlines because we had to. But that would have been the other backup plan. So these are just things to just always have on hand, no matter what the scenario is. I think now in this particular scenario, those who are working remotely, it could have been their first time working remotely, or going to be their first time for an extended period of time. Make sure you have enough power, power supplies. You might need an extra monitor now, or a proper chair. That's my issue. I don't have a proper monitor or a chair because I'm kind of old school. I don't work from home a lot, even though I can. And now it's like, oh my God, I don't have a proper chair. Now I got to be sitting down here at home. So I have to look into that, being that we are now going to full-time working from home. So, and again, that's expense, and, people don't have that. So it may not be for now, but later, again, the investment will be worth it to kind of start looking into budgeting for these things in case, maybe even the next snowstorm, you're not worried about it. You got your equipment ready to go. You know how to set yourself up and be comfortable for these extended periods of time where you're working remotely. Because it can cause, I'm uncomfortable because I'm not quite prepared with a proper chair. So I'm standing up a lot. I don't want to start causing physical pain.
Right.
So things like that, prepare for and mentally prepare for that worst case scenario that you wouldn't have any control over if they do decide to do full-blown quarantine of the country. Just kind of like, and I know mental, you'll get into that, just kind of ready for that.
Yeah, well, you bring up a lot of good points just about preparing for things that we don't usually think about. I remember the last hurricane that we had in New Jersey, the really bad one. And out of all of the things that I could anticipate, the one thing that I didn't anticipate was the gas situation.
Yeah.
Man, that was crazy. You don't think okay, we out of gas. So I can't even get anywhere. I can't get gas. So that was rough.
I think that caught a lot of people off guard. And what was also the kicker, how the gas stations were run by power, and guess what was out? The power. Right. So not only that you couldn't get gas, they almost couldn't give you gas because they didn't have power to do so. So I think that little kicker right there was implemented into a lot of business continuity plans going forward, like which gas stations have generators or things like that to be able to redirect people if possible. But I remember seeing the long lines outside my window in Secaucus at that time of waiting for gas. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, this has been extremely helpful. Hopefully everyone took some notes just in preparing as far as the things that we don't usually think about. I do have a question as far as food is concerned, because I will get into just how to prepare more from a healthier perspective, but also as far as how much food is ideal, not food that we have to eat, but food that we should have stored that's not a part of what we're eating in the moment. What do you think is a good amount of food to have for how long?
Yeah, so there's probably different schools of thought on it, but I think from a general perspective, 3 to 5 days, you want to kind of always have something like that on hand. Obviously, again, every scenario is different. We're talking about an extended period of time with this situation, but we're also, at the moment, we're still allowed to go to the store. We're still able to leave our homes and go to the store and re-up. So, but you want to think maybe there's a scenario where you can't leave right away. There's no thinking about it. You're waiting for the government to tell you that you have to stay inside. You have to shelter in place. So I would say 3 to 5 days. Or you want to get full prepper mode. You can get that, military grade food that lasts 25 years just in case, that's the extreme measure of it. There's always the extreme of prepping, and obviously the other extreme is not caring about it at all, right? So just finding that right balance and boundaries. Those who have houses, one other thing that we learned from the hurricane, and I hope that they got them, was their own generators, solar power generators. I hope that people invested in them where they can and where they have houses, because that was another thing that people who did do that was better off than those who did not. So just, always like take your lessons learned and kind of implement them going forward. So we're going to learn a lot from this. And then hopefully what you learn, you kind of implement so that you're just better prepared for the next bad thing that happens.
Yeah, I know you're talking about, one of the things you spoke about was the bank run, people running to get their cash. So you want to make sure you have some ahead of time, being ahead of the curve. Yeah. One thing that this panic has caused is, like a grocery store run, right? Yeah. So I'm seeing empty grocery stores right now. And it being hard to even stock food because it's not available in not all areas, but in a lot of areas. So yeah, I think preparation is definitely the key for us. And just to switch gears a little bit, because I know that, we have clients that are entrepreneurs, they have their own businesses and things like that. And, you specialize in like businesses. Like, what do you have any recommendations for business owners out there and how they can prepare their businesses for potential problems?
Right. So we know mainly for the most part, you got your large businesses, they're already looking at this, always looking at it. For your small businesses and those who are entrepreneurs, it kind of depends on what their business is. Sometimes people are just fully, online and things happen for itself, maybe a full like Amazon store or something like that. But those who have like brick or mortar, those who have to meet with clients one-on-one, maybe even who run their business off their computer somehow and storing files locally on their computer, or even in the cloud, how is that being backed up if the Amazon cloud or Google cloud or whatever goes down. So it's just kind of like, again, it's various scenarios to plan for, but you want to think about what's the consequence of those scenarios. So if you lost your technology of your business, just your business, like what would you do? What would you do if your internet right now into your business didn't work? Or your computer crashed and then all your files, all your client files are on that. What would you do if you couldn't come into your office for whatever reason? They won't allow you because some biohazard spill happened down the road, or there was a fire in your building and they won't let you in. What would you do if your employees couldn't come in, or your assistant? So it's like kind of like planning for that as much as you can, because I understand small businesses, there's no budget for that, but it is careful planning so that, again, when you have a hiccup or there's a hiccup, that you want to be able to bounce back from that rather quickly and maintain your clients, maintain your connection with your clients, and that you still have a business after the event has happened. Right.
Yeah, that's really important. So if anyone has any questions about anything that was shared with us tonight, you could definitely post them in the Q&A.
I have two questions.
Okay, we'll get to them at the end.
Okay.
I just wanted to just let everyone know that they can post questions there, and I know Kim has an eye on the chat as well, so you can post some things there. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get into just a couple of things that we can do to armor ourselves and prepare ourselves from a health perspective. And then we can get into some Q&A from there. Huron, before we get into that, was there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I think basically for like small businesses, if we have any of those, on the line here, or entrepreneurs who is looking to start their business, that, I do this for large corporations, right? I'm full-time doing this in the financial industry, but I am starting a business to kind of assist small businesses and helping them kind of think that through. So they can contact me. I can give my information at the end of this. if they do want to have a talk about okay, what would I do in this scenario and what do I need to implement? I'd be willing to do that. This is what I do. I really like what I do. I know it's not in the best ways. It's always like, the crisis and stuff. But the best way to go about it is to think about these things when it's sunny outside and things are all good. And that's when you think about it. That's when you plan it and document it. Better to do it then than in the actual time of crisis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So can you hang out for a few and we'll come back to some questions? Okay.
Sure thing. I'll just put myself on mute.
Okay, perfect. So
that is the conclusion of part 1 of our Armoring Yourself Against the Coronavirus series. There was a lot of great information that Huron shared. If you can, re-listen to this episode, take notes, and implement the strategies that Huron had suggested. I certainly am. There was some things that I didn't have in order.
Right.
And it's definitely eye-opening. And Huron was saying it's not something that you want to think about, but it's a must in these days and times so that we can be better prepared for the next situation.
Right. And I think that's what the important thing is just being prepared. It's better to be prepared and not need the things that you prepared for as opposed to a major challenge happening or this thing really evolving and you're actually not prepared.
Right.
Because it is something that is fast growing. I mean, I was looking at the CDC reports today, and since the last report that we aired today, it already increased by over 500 cases. So this is something serious. It's something that's rapidly moving, and you want to try to be ahead of this as much as possible.
Yes. And stay tuned for part 2, which will release tomorrow.
Yes.
And in that episode, we're going to dive deeper into things that you personally can do to arm yourself against the coronavirus, improve your immunity, and so much more. So stay tuned for that episode tomorrow. And the show notes page for this episode is lifestrengthandhealth.com/166. There you can also get Huron's contact information if you would like to work with her or consult with her if you're self-employed or if you have a business. Her services are definitely available for you to take advantage of. Okay, so thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode. And until next time, live healthier.
Yes, stay healthy, everyone. Stay centered and stay in the know. Peace and blessings.